Good morning, everybody, and I welcome you for today's webinar, Helping Families to Support AAC Users, organized by Access to Communication and Technology Unit, which is a service within Agencia Sapport. For those who are not familiar with our service, I would like to give a brief introduction of this service. So ACTU, in short, was set up in 2007 as part of the Education and Inclusive Network. The unit was aimed to expand and implement the use of assistive technology and augmentative and alternative communication across all schools so that it was not limited to one special school. The team then was moved to Agencia Sapport in November 2019 with the aim to start offering an adult service in the near future. So ACTU service is a consultative service which is offered to children under the age of 16 years, and it offers two services, mainly the augmentative and alternative communication and the electronic assistive technology, which is given by speech and language therapists and occupational therapists who are specialized in these areas. Currently, the team is made up of 4 therapists, basically myself, Sharon Borch-Cambry, who is the occupational therapist on the team, and 3 speech and language therapists, who are Dr. May Ajus, Ms. Jamie Said, and Ms. Martina Zarp, who will be presenting today's webinar. The mission of our service is to support the individual's communication, independence, quality of life, and participation in society. So, I would like also to let you know that this is a series of webinars, and we will be organizing in the coming week another webinar, which is about assistive technology to support writing, and that will be presented on the 24th of June from 11 a.m. to 1 o'clock. And the aim of this webinar is to give an overview of assistive technology that supports the organization of thoughts into writing and also alternative ways of writing. Today's webinar will be also followed by another webinar on the 8th of July between 10 and 12 p.m., which will focus on setting up an AAC implementation plan for AAC users at home. So please mark the date, because this will be another useful webinar for all of you. Also, I would like to let you know that we are going to also co-hosting 2 other webinars on Clicker software together with Phil Hackett from Cricksoft and Moonpalau Trading Ltd, which is the agent in Malta, and this is going to be happening on the 1st and 3rd July 2020. So please check the Agencia Sapport website and follow our events. And as you know, Clicker is one of the software that is available also in our schools and that are available for children. So it is time to start with today's webinar, Helping Families to Support AAC Users. So this webinar will provide some general ideas to parents and some strategies which can be used to set the scene for successful use of AAC systems in the home. So I will introduce Dr. May Ajus, Jamie Said, and Martina Zarp, our speech and language therapists, who will be presenting this webinar. So I will be giving the floor to May Ajus.
Thank you, Sharon. As Sharon said, I'm going to be talking to you about supporting your child to use AAC in the home. And if I can turn the slide, yes, we're going to talk about a few different topics. First one being aided language input. And if you've never heard about that before, please don't worry about that, because I'll be explaining to you exactly what it is, how we do it, and why we need to do this. We'll also be looking at home setting for teaching AAC use, because it is a specific kind of setting, and we're quite interested in this right now because so many of you are at home with your children, and so we feel this is a good time for maybe to get some communication going and to help your children to use their AAC devices more. Within the home setting, we're going to look at everyday routines. So we're not going to be talking about setting up special times to use your device. We're going to talk about how you can use AAC in any routine that happens on a daily basis. Later on, Jamie Syed will be talking about motivation and how that can be used to promote successful AAC use. And Martina Zarb will be talking about prompting. And we would feel that when you have all of these things in place, that you are more likely to have success in terms of using AAC. Another thing I want to say right now is that although we might be referring to the use of devices, like high-tech devices, you can also be taking these concepts and applying them to other kinds of AAC. For example, a communication book, which is low-tech, or even unaided AAC, which is where you use your hands. You can ask questions using the Q&A button, which should be showing on your screen. We will not be answering the questions right now. What we'll be doing is saving those questions and answering them at the end of the presentation. Okay, so the first thing I mentioned was aided language input. What is it? Well, it's a term that we use when we talk about how you should model with the AAC device. So when we're talking about modeling, this means that you talk, but you should also be pointing to the symbols or photos on the AAC device as well. If you're using something that doesn't speak, like a communication book, then that maybe you would also be pointing to those pictures on the communication book. If you're using signing, that you use signing as well. So modeling is where you are also using the same system that you want your child to use. Why do we do this? It helps the child to start understanding what those visuals or symbols mean, so that eventually the child can use them himself. So if I point to a picture on a communication device and it speaks hello, then eventually the child is going to work out that every time I press that particular symbol, it's going to say hello. Similarly, if I use a sign for hello and the child starts to see that regularly, he's eventually going to learn what that sign means. Remember that when it comes to high tech especially, your child needs to learn two things to really be able to learn to use his device. He needs to learn where the symbols are located. So you cannot have all the pictures on one page. So, and this is the same whether it's a high-tech device or whether it's a communication book. So he needs to learn where those pictures or symbols are. So in a high-tech device, most likely, if he presses one symbol, it will lead to a page of other symbols. So if he presses something like the eat button, it might lead to a lot of pictures about food. In a communication book, he would need to learn how to turn the pages to know where that food symbol is. The other thing, however, that a child needs to learn is how he's going to use the symbols during communication. So it's not just about knowing where they are, but knowing how to use them. When is the right time to use that symbol? For example, I use the hello symbol when I meet somebody and I want to say hello to them. I use the toilet symbol when I want to go to a toilet. But I might also use a toilet symbol when I see a toilet. So here we're talking about the how of communicating. And for some children, this is going to be something that they really need a lot of help on. So it's really important that they see the symbols and the pictures or the signs being used in many different situations. So if your child is able to say some words already, then modeling can help them to learn some new words. So maybe your child only knows how to say 10 or 15 words, and it could be that AAC has been recommended for your child. In that situation, the AAC system could be being used to help them to say more words or to learn more words. Similarly, your child might be using 10 or 15 signs with their hands. Maybe we want them to learn some new signs. In that situation, then what we're going to do is start to use some more signs so that they can see what these signs mean, and it will help to extend their vocabulary. Another reason why we use aided language input or modelling is because it can help a child to learn how to put more words together. What we want is for our children to start developing language. And in the first stages, we're happy for children to start to put together 2 words to make simple phrases like more juice, or maybe stop play, go daddy. So we're initially looking for those ways that we can put words together to make small phrases. But as the child starts to progress, we want them to go beyond this. So what we'd like to see is starting to put together small sentences. And that brings me to the next one, that we also hope that by using aiding language input, that we will actually start to be able to show the child how he can start to use grammar. Because when we speak, if we're looking for our children to really develop language, then it could be that for your child, the end goal would be that that language is fully developed with a full and complete grammar system. Those of you who have been to ACTU, you would know that we tend to recommend systems in English because we are able to offer grammar, and it could be that other children might want Maltese, but we would be quite restricted around that because we don't yet have the systems in place for Maltese. But we are working on that. Okay, so when it comes to developing language, what we ideally want is for everyone at home to use the system. And here you can see in this picture, this is courtesy of Coughbox AAC. You have the student or the learner who uses the device on the left-hand side, and then you have his family members who all have the similar system downloaded on other devices. And we're not going to say that's going to be possible because it might not be, but what the point of this picture is that when more people use the device, it helps the child to see that this is a normal thing to communicate with AAC. And why is that? Because if we look at this slide here, if you look at the very top, you have the input is the spoken language. And for a typically developing child, what they'll be doing is hearing people around them talk. And so the input is the spoken language. And therefore, the output for that child will be the spoken language as well. So children learn to speak because they hear other people speak around them. But in the middle, we have our child and all those question marks, because for some reason, the child that is coming to ACTU, for who we've recommended AAC system, is not able to speak, or is only able to speak some words, or maybe when he speaks, his speech is not clear. And he's listening to spoken language, so his input is spoken, but then we're expecting him to use aided language. We're expecting him to use an AAC system. And this creates some confusion because what he's hearing doesn't match what we want him to do in terms of his communication. So for this child, what we want and what we feel is more ideal is that they hear the spoken language, they see the AAC system being used because an AAC system is a visual system, and then we hope that they will use the AAC system, and if it's possible, hopefully they will also maybe develop some spoken language as well. As we said, there could be some children who already have some spoken language. Maybe they're saying a few words, and AAC has been recommended to help them develop more verbal language or more words, and in which case we would be seeing that the AAC system is like a bridge to help them to develop more language. There are a group of children who are able to speak, but can only speak some phrases that they've learned. And we found that sometimes with an AAC system, they can do more with their language, but they need to see it in terms of symbols to be able to say more. So from our point of view, whatever works for the child is whatever we will go with. And so for some children, we're going to be looking for a combination of using the AAC system and speaking, and maybe even using signs as well and other things. And that's all okay, so long as the child is able to communicate in the best way that they can. Basically, in a nutshell, What we're saying here is that if we want children to speak AAC, we have to speak AAC to them. The only instance that I'm going to say there's an exception to this is with PECS. So if we have any PECS users out there, PECS has its own protocol, and the protocol means that the child would not, that the parent or the family member would not use the PECS system with the child, because that is considered to be the child's AAC system. But for every other kind of AAC system, we would be hoping that you would also start to feel confident to know where the vocabulary is in the system so that you can use it as well when you're talking to your child. Almost that it becomes second nature to you, that you start to use it every day without thinking. I think one of the questions that we might tackle later on could be, what do I do if I don't know where the words are in my child's system? And I think that's not something I've put in the slides, but it could be something that we talk about later on. So how are we going to do all this? The first thing is to make sure that the AAC system is always close to the child, so it's available and charged. If your child is using signing, then that's going to be fairly straightforward, because that you don't have to worry about bringing anything with you. But if the child is using any aided language system, for example, if they're using a communication book, then you need to bring it. It needs to be around the child. If the child is using a communication device with voice output, make sure it's charged and bring it with you. It might not be possible to model every word on the device, and that's okay. Right, what we're saying here is that, number one, we have to consider the child's current level, and it could be that for some reason ACTU has decided, your therapists at ACTU have decided to only expose your child to some words, not many words yet. Maybe he's in early stages of using the device. In that situation, you can't possibly model every word, but you can model the words that are there. So we often talk about core vocabulary, and the reason we talk about core vocabulary is because these are words that you can use in many situations. So you might not have the word yogurt or the word banana, but you might have the word eat. So you can use eat in that situation, and that's a core word. You might not have those words, but you might have words like more. And more is another word that you can use in many situations. You can use that word during the eating situation, but you can also use a word like more in playtime, or when you're playing, for example, with a ball and throwing it back and forth. Or it could also be used, for example, in bath time, if it was science, because obviously you're not going to bring your device into the bath. Providing opportunities to use the device in different ways. And I think this is a trap that we all fall into. We're very big on teaching children how to ask for things. And especially because we know that when we teach children to ask for things, they get something that they really want. But if we don't move on and use the device or the system in a different way, then all we will get is a child asking for things. And that becomes a problem, because that's not how we communicate. We use our communication for a lot more than just asking for things. So other things that you can think about doing is talking about things that you see, and we refer to this as commenting. So for example, you saw a dog, and at that point you take the opportunity to sign dog, or to show the child where dog is in the device. Daddy's gone to work. That's a perfect time to say to the child, gone, and you show the child where gone is on the device. Another example could be don't, and it could be that the child doesn't want to do something, and at that point you take the opportunity to show them how they can say this with their device, because we would prefer them to say it rather than to actually throw something or to engage in a tantrum. So what we're saying here is, the more you use your device in different ways, the more likely that you will have your child using it in different ways. These are things that you can talk about with your therapists. Also, in our second AAC webinar, which is in July, we'll be talking about goal setting And I think we'll be tackling it more so in that one. One really basic thing that you can do is you can talk about what you and your child are doing at the same time. So if you're doing something together, you can talk about what you're doing. If you are doing something and your child is interested, you can talk about what your child is doing as well at that time. So you're using the AAC system to show the child how they can use it in day-to-day conversation, just as you would when you're normally talking. You can use the pictures on the device to make comments, to ask for things, for greetings like hello and goodbye, and for asking questions as well. Going back to greetings, our first preference is that the child would use their body if possible, if they cannot speak the word hello or goodbye. And there might be some work to be done around that. But if it's really not a possibility, then obviously we would like you to use your AAC system for this as well. The fourth one there about asking questions. We're very interested in asking questions because if you think about typically developing children, this is going to happen around the time a child reaches the age of 2. So it comes in quite early, and we would like our kids to be proactive and ask questions as well. Use as many of the pictures that are available on the AAC device as you can. Okay, so get around your device. If you have lots of words there, you might need to say, okay, I'm going to focus on these words for the next few weeks. But try and use your pictures. If you always stick to the same ones, then your child will use the same ones. Basically what we're saying here is your child will use what he sees you using. Try not to ask too many questions. The general rule is ask one question to 4 comments. Very easy to fall in the trap of always asking loads of questions. So asking your child, show me the dog, can you find dog, where's dog in your device or your talker, is not really something that we advocate. If though you had a game where the child had to find objects that were hidden in the room or pull out an object from a bag, then it would be very appropriate for you to name that object when you took it out of the bag or when you found it. And that's when you go ahead and you say, oh, you found, and then you might tell the child using the device or using signing, and of course using words as well. You should be aiming for 80% of your communication with your child to be using AAC as well. We know that there are times when you just can't use your system, and that's okay. But you might in your mind say to yourself, I think it would be a good time to use my device when we're eating, and maybe when we're watching telly together, when I'm reading him a story, when we're playing a game. Those are all good times, but we know, of course, that there's going to be those times where it's just not going to happen for you because you have other children or because you're really busy, and that's okay as well. I think what we're saying here is use the device as much as you can and what is available to you in terms of your time and your family situation. We recognise that everyone lives in a different scenario, and obviously people have other things going on in their lives as well. So how we actually model, so we've got all those things in place. We know we want to have the device everywhere. We want to try and model as much as possible, but how we actually do it. One thing that you might try is what we call the wait and signal strategy. This is where you've modeled with the device, so you have shown your child what you want them to do, or you've done something with the device, or you've used a sign, and then you wait. You might try raising your eyebrows. It kind of gives a signal to the child that you are expecting them to do something. Another thing you can use is the expectant look, right? So listen, I'm expecting you to try and do something now. When you do this, so you've modeled with a device, and then you just wait, and you're looking at your child, and you're letting them know that I hope you do something now with the device. Okay? Try not to say, do this, say this, use your device at this stage. Just wait and see what happens. As a general rule, we would say to people, count to 5 maximum. So give your child lots of time to make that message. And it's okay if they don't make one. You know yourselves what is best for your child. For some children, waiting 5 seconds is not long enough. Maybe they need lots of time to move their hands. For other children, 5 seconds is too long because maybe they are children who are very much on the go, they're quite hyper, they have trouble with attention. So in that situation, you wouldn't wait the full 5 seconds. If they don't do anything, you can try prompting, and Martina's going to talk about prompting later so that you can know what kinds of prompts you can use. If you do this, though, eventually you will have small conversations, and that's the goal. What we would like to see here is that it's a series of turns. We're not talking about major conversation at the early stages, but that when you do something, your child does something back to you, and then hopefully you can do something again. So what we're saying here is that we now have a small conversation. Now, how do we actually model with the AAC device? We might need to make it visual, right? Using the AAC device when you talk to your child will help him to learn the new words and to understand routines and experiences and activities. But in the beginning, you might feel your child understands the symbols or the photos in your device better if you show him the visual at the same time as a real object. So here we have a picture of a biscuit, and the person is going to model biscuit on the device. So if that is necessary, you will have been advised to do this by your speech therapists or your ACTU therapist, one or the other. But there might be a small transition phase where we would be doing that as well. So if you feel your child has a problem with understanding the visuals, there's 2 things that I would say to you. The first one is that you need to look at how often you are using the device, because children will learn where the symbols are and what the symbols mean because they keep seeing other people using them. But sometimes we want to give the child a little bit of help, and if that might be something we might want to do as well, and if that's the case, you might be thinking, okay, I'm going to show the child the real thing at the same time when I'm actually using the device. As I said before, everything I'm saying also goes for signing as well. I wanted to give you some examples of how this might work in practice. So in this example here, we have the example of actually putting together 2 words. And what we want is for this, the actual situation would be that the child wants to play with these sea creatures that are in a plastic jar, and the plastic jar is closed. And what we want is for the child to request. We want the child to ask for these sea creatures. So what we would do here is we can say to the child, open it using the device because the jar is closed. We can say things like give me using the device, and we can say want one or want it, right? Then we have to wait and signal. So as we said before, we're going to count to 5. Average, as we said, it could be more or it could be less. We're also going to signal to our child using our faces, using that expectant look, raising your eyebrows if that helps, and letting the child know, hey, it's your turn now. If your child doesn't respond, shake the jar, right? Give the jar to the child and keep it closed, right? Here what you're doing is you're creating a bit of an opportunity. You're tempting that child, letting them know, well, you can have this, but maybe it's not quite right. You've got to do something here. So at that point, you might need to gesture to your communication display or to your communication book. So you might point to it. Once your learner responds, if you get that response, you immediately need to open the jar and give the child what they want. Okay, in this case, it's a sea creature. Okay, so you want them to see that when they do something, they get something really fast. And that's what we call reinforcement. The use here of the sea creatures in the plastic jar, that is related to motivator. We know that this child wants these things. Jamie will be talking a lot more about motivators when following me. In a sense, if you want the child to request, you need to choose things that you know that child is going to want to ask for. And in this situation, we were focusing on putting two words together, so we can assume that this child is already able to use one word. So this is an example of how we can extend using the device from a single word to two words. In the next slide, though, we're going to look at something else. Here, we're looking at protesting. And I know this comes up for lots of parents, that their children might be protesting, saying they don't want to do things, and they do it in an inappropriate way, in a way that maybe you wouldn't like them to do. For example, throwing something, or maybe hitting you, or maybe hitting themselves. And in this situation, what we would like is for the child to start to express that protest in a much more appropriate way. So what we need to think about here is to bring out non-preferred boring activities. And I'm going to explain this. We want to bring out things that we know the child is not really interested in. We need to be careful here, because if we bring out things that they really dislike, then we're not going to be able to teach, because it's going to cause a reaction. So we start with things that are not too disliked. So we can choose about 2 to 4 non-preferred activities for every preferred one, depending on the learner's frustration level. You don't want to do huge amounts of this, because if you do, it's going to drive them mad. And what would you say with the device? So for example, I've given a child a banana. He's not too bothered about bananas. He definitely doesn't like them. So really we want him to say to me no or stop. An example of stop could be, I gave the child, I showed that we're playing a game that the child doesn't like too much, and I think he would want to say stop. So in that situation, what I'm going to do is model those words on the device. I'm going to model no or stop on the device according to the situation. And then I'm going to wait and signal. Now, in that column next to that, it's saying think aloud. You could say something like, oh, I think you don't like this. I think I need to press no on the device. So you're giving them a bit of a clue about what they can do as well. If the learner doesn't respond quickly, right, and here you want it to be quite quick, you can model no again. So you might press no again on the device, or show them no on the communication book, or shake your head no, and take them away, take the item away, right? So just take it away, and then show him what you can say. Stop, no, right? And then give them something nice, because you don't want to keep on doing this. It's going to tire them out. But you do want to show the power of protesting. You do want to show them that when we say no or stop, that it actually has a result, an effect. Once the learner gets the idea, they usually don't mind saying no many times until they get what they want. So what you need to do here is teach them how to say no. It's really important. To us, it's just as important as asking for what you want. Because in true life, this is what we do. Sometimes we say yes, sometimes we say no, sometimes we ask for things. And because we want to give them a way of doing this before they start to become more challenging in the way that they do it. So for example, throwing things. We don't really want to get it to that point. Okay, but one thing I would say to you, if your child is already engaging in those behaviors, if they already do things like throwing things, then you want to introduce this pretty fast, because what you want to do is replace that throwing of objects and make it become something that is more acceptable for everybody. Although it would be harder to get rid of that behavior that was already there, and so you have to work a bit harder on that one. So we've talked about the aided language input and now we're going to think about how we're going to use it in our routines. Communication happens throughout the day, so there are a lot of opportunities for you to model using your AAC device or system. So here we're saying we don't need to think about setting up specific times. You will be doing that probably with a speech therapist, and she might be giving you some advice about that. But there are lots of things that you can be doing at home, especially right now when your child is not at school. It also means, though, that there are lots of times when you can interact with your child and support their language development. So we can think about now where to use AAC and ways that we can use it within everyday situations. We've already spoken a little bit about lunchtime as an example, watching TV, story time. These are all everyday activities that you can use. So where are you going to use this device? Everywhere. Here in these pictures, we have a picture of a father and his son using it together. We have a picture of granddad and his son using a device. We have a mother reading a book with her device. We have somebody in her playroom. And then at the very bottom in the right-hand side, we have some people in a group activity also using the device. So we're not too fussed where you use your device. You can use it everywhere. So think about where you're going to bring that AAC device. I mean, we're going to have to be realistic here. If it is a high-tech AAC device, you might not be able to see the screen in bright sunlight. And we know this is a big issue for us in Malta because the sun is so bright and you will have that glare on the screen. So that might be a problem. If you're using a low-tech, a communication book, that will be easier. You can bring that with you. If it's the beach, you probably won't want to take it there anyway because of sand and sea. So here you might think of other solutions. Also think about the activity. It might be difficult to use the AAC device in some activities like horse riding because the child's hands are busy. You could equally say this about maybe going to an occupational therapy session, but there's no reason why the therapist can't use it as well. So there are always solutions here. Discuss with the adults who are working with your child if you think it's difficult to manage everything. It should be doable on some level. Where are we going to use these routines? Going back to that difficulty, you might want a low-tech alternative which is paper-based. Here in the pictures, you're looking at low-tech paper-based alternatives. If you don't have a paper-based alternative and you think you might want one, can you talk to us at ACTU? We can help with this. You might also be thinking that it would be useful to have one in the event of a breakdown as well. So something happens with your device and you think to yourself, okay, I have to send it back to the manufacturer, or I have to replace the screen right now on my iPad. In that situation, you might be thinking it's good to have a low-tech system as well. So a paper-based system is something we can help you with. So you want to make a list of your everyday routines that happen in your home. Which activities happen every day or weekly in which you can bring AAC use into it? So it could be that you're saying to yourself, right, I'm going to start with some activities for now, and then I'm going to build on that later. So in the beginning stages, I might say, right, I'm going to definitely have my device being used during lunchtime. I'm also going to try and use it when we read a story at bedtime. I'm going to try and sit down with my child at least 10 minutes a day, watch telly with him and use the system at the same time. And then you start to gradually build up on that as you become more comfortable with it, because we're going to be honest here. Who's learning to use the device? The child, but also you. Everyone here is learning to use the device at the same time. I just put the example here of lunchtime. It could be that I'm going to use my device for eating lunch. And I'm also going to use my device when we're preparing lunch, so that we've got quite a lot of device use even there. And we've got a lot of words that we could be talking and the child could be learning within this situation. You might have opportunities within those routines to work on words and phrases that are AAC goals which have been set for your child. So you're probably working in the beginning a lot with your ACTU therapists. Definitely you should have a speech therapist. It might be one from the Ministry of Health, or it could be a private one, who will also have set some goals with you. So it's important to know what goals are set for your child. Are they that we're going to use some words? Are they that we're going to make phrases? Are they that he will ask for things? Are the goals that he will say no to protest? Is there the goal that he will use greetings? When you know those goals, it will guide you a little bit about how you use the device. Going back to that lunch example, we can do these things. We can encourage the child to ask for cutlery like fork and spoon and knife. We can get the child to ask for food and drink items. And this can be in single words. So it could just be banana, juice, yogurt, or it could be want banana, more juice, banana finish, right? So that's the asking thing. We can encourage a child to ask for help. Asking for help is a really important goal for a child because it's something that they might need to do. So for example, they can open the jar, ask for help to open that jar. They might need help to put the straw in the juice carton. They might need help to open a box and the lunch is in the box. Expressing opinions. I think very often we forget about this one, but it's important that we give children a way that they can say, I like juice, I like sandwich, I don't like apple. So that, and to do that, we would need to model that in the situation. If you see your child is having fun and really enjoying something that you've prepared for them, then say, I like it, to show the child how they can express that opinion. If you see the child is not really enjoying his lunch and you think it's because he doesn't like it, then model that at that time and say to him, oh, I think you want to say, and then show the child on the device how they can say, I don't like. Another thing is when you're doing this, it's going to slow you down automatically. And that gives the child time to process, to understand where to find those words and how to find them in the device. Another thing you can do during lunchtime is concepts. So you can work on things like big and small. For example, you might deliberately give that child a really small piece of a sandwich and you're having a laugh and you're making this fun and you go, oh, it's small, right? And that way you can teach the child that concept of small in a fun way. You can also do this with numbers. So your child loves M&Ms or chocolate buttons. Then you can give them just one, or you can give them lots. Or you can give them 5 and be specific depending on your goal. And this way you're starting to introduce something else in here. Routines are a good place to start teaching AAC use because you probably use the same language in the routine over and over, and that is a really good thing. But changing routines every now and again can present the user with new opportunities for communication. So just like that example I gave you, where if you always give your child the same sandwich cut in the same way, and then all of a sudden you cut that sandwich into 4 pieces instead of 2, then that gives you a chance to introduce number, and you can introduce lots, and you can say many. So making a change every now and again is a really good way for you to introduce new words. A lot of times commenting happens when we change things. So that's when we can say, oh, wow, more, and we use these words. For lunchtime, it could be as well that you deliberately forget the child and the fork. Oh my God, not the child. You forget the fork a child needs. So that you have created a new opportunity for your child to ask for something that they don't normally ask for. It could be that you give the child a different kind of juice. So instead of orange juice, today it's blackcurrant. And that gives you a chance to talk about colours and fruit. So you've introduced new words here. Another thing that you can do is try new things at lunch, try new foods. And you could invite other people for lunch. So here, when you do something like this, it is different to the normal routine, and that gives you a way of introducing new words and showing the child how they can use their device or their AAC system in a different way. So where do you start with all this? You make a list of routines. You think about how you can include AAC in that routine. As I said earlier, we're not going to say you have to use every single routine when you're starting off, but you might want to use ones that you feel comfortable with at first and think about you extending them over time. Think about what language you're going to model in that activity. So we're going back to the beginning, which is the aided language input. And make a plan for how you're going to extend the language as your child starts to achieve the goals. because if you do this, you will find your child starts to use his device and you need to be ready to move on. Of course, you would want to talk to your speech and language therapist about this. She's going to help you with the goals if you're not sure what to do. But one very straightforward goal is always more words. A second very straightforward goal is child does one word on his device. Let me see how I can show him how he can make it into 2 words. Okay. One more thing we can do is we can look at transitions between routines. So you've got your routines, but a lot of things happen in between the routines. So for examples here that came to my mind is that you might be going from one room to another room, and at that time you might want to say the word go. You can talk about things that you see when you're going from one place to another. It could be that you're going from home to shopping. So in that situation, you might want to say the words go, close for close the door, shoes if you're going to put shoes on. So there's lots of words that you can use even when you're in between 2 things. You might feel comfortable using those as well. The unplanned activity. This happens to all of us, right? An activity which is unexpected is a great time to find new words to communicate in that situation. It is a challenge and you might make mistakes, but the important thing is that the AAC device is available, and that was one of the first things we said at the very beginning. If you know what words are in your device, try and use the words you have. A lot of times the core words, and we're always talking about core words, those words, you might find a word or 2 from those that you can use. But maybe you just said to yourself, I wish I had other words that are not in the device. Keep a list of those. If you don't know how to program them in, talk to your speech and language therapist or to ACTU therapists. We can help you with this. If you already know how to edit, then maybe you can add them yourself afterwards. If you add new words, then you need to make sure you show the child how to use those words again in another scenario. I'm hearing here that one thing I want to tell you now is if you want to post questions, please do so, and you can post them anonymously. We won't, so nobody will see who is asking those questions. So please feel free to ask any questions as I'm talking, because maybe something is coming up for you and you would like us to answer later on. Thank you. So the overall goal of introducing an AAC system is to build social interactions. Using AAC is a way to chat with others, to share news and to participate in activities that are motivating. So I think for us who work at ACTU, we don't just see the device or system as something for asking for things or for saying no. We see it as a way for children to connect with people and to build those social interactions. So we want the child to be able to chat with others. This is where we want to go. We want them to be able to share news, to tell you about something that happened at school, to tell Daddy about something that happened at home when he was at work. And we want to help children to be able to participate in activities that are motivating. So we want to minimize the use of AAC for testing situations. If possible, we don't want to be asking them loads and loads of questions with the device. We don't want to be testing them with the device. That's not what AAC systems are designed for. They're designed to support the social interaction. Right, I'm just going to go back now because I've come to an end on the bit that I'm going to present. Jamie Side is now going to present the next part on motivation. So I'm just going to give her control. Please feel free to ask any questions.
All right. So may I thank you, first of all. I've requested control of your PowerPoint. It should work now. Yes, I think it does. Okay. All right. Yes. Okay. So thank you, May, for that very interesting part of the webinar. So from my end, as May said before, just a little reminder. I will be talking more about motivation at this point. May has spoken about aided language input and routines, which are two very, very important components of successful use of AAC and supporting your child to communicate at home. The third component I will be talking about is motivation, which is equally as important. Okay, as you can see in front of you, I've collected a few pointers which talk about motivation, and I will be delving into each of them and giving you more information about each point. So I will start with the first one, which is reinforcers. It's at the top of the wheel. Which is probably one of the most important, I'd say. May has briefly mentioned it in her part, but I will be talking about it in a little bit more detail. So I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the term reinforcers, but for those of you who aren't, reinforcers is a technical and maybe a fancy word that we use to refer to things that a child likes. So things that a child makes them happy and possibly more engaged. So to the parents out there, maybe you're probably often asked from other professionals, what does your child like? Anything in particular that your child likes to play with? At that point, the person is obviously asking for ideas for reinforcers that can be used with your child, which are sometimes used as like a bargaining tool or as rewards, for instance. So reinforcers are often tangible, and they could be very, very powerful tools. In fact, they are so powerful that, as May said, we are constantly using them in our clinics and therapy to get the child to communicate. So, for instance, if we see that a child is interested in a particular toy, we could ask him, oh, okay, so you could tell me what you want, and you could request that particular toy, and by using your communication device, for instance. So some common reinforcers, as you probably know, are for example, like the famous tablet. It's a very, very powerful reinforcer. Maybe bubbles or puzzles or a ball, and it could even be something like listening to music. So there are also reinforcers that are maybe less tangible. So, for instance, an activity that the child likes to do, for example, going for a walk. In that case, you'd encourage your child, for instance, to do some work, and then you would use the walk as a reinforcer. So you could tell him, if you do this particular activity, you can go outside for a walk, and then use that opportunity to encourage the child to ask you to go for a walk. So it is very, very important to identify the appropriate reinforcers for your child, as this could be one of the keys to getting your child properly motivated. If you think about it, this also applies to us adults. We are always better motivated if we know that something we like is coming our way. Yes, that's with regards to reinforcers. So the second point I'm going to talk about is so going on your right is consider yourself. So this is could be quite a sensitive one to talk about, especially from the eyes of a professional, as it probably applies to someone to mostly professionals rather than actual parents. So sometimes Obviously, after considering a number of options, we just have to keep in mind that maybe us as professionals need to take a step back and reflect on what we are doing and what it is that is actually making the child annoyed and basically less motivated to work. When we're thinking about all of this, it would be maybe quite good to include us as professionals in the picture. So us, that the professionals that we are working with the child. So I think I speak for everyone here when I say that when professionals are working with a child, they want nothing but the best for him or for her. After all, that is our ethical duty. So speaking about this could maybe be a bit more of a sensitive matter, but yes, it is actually possible that sometimes you as a professional are maybe just not very motivating. The child may not find it very motivating to work with you. In Maltese, we have this famous word which is called grazia. So we say, for instance, maħax grazia miegħek. It's a reality. Sometimes it happens. Yes, it's very sad for us professionals. But it does happen. And if we think about it, again, it happens to us adults. Actually, I'd say especially us adults, because children can be a little bit more innocent and easygoing in that respect. But yes, it does happen to us. We find that maybe we don't get along very well with that particular person. And in the same way, it could happen also, obviously, to children, as they are humans as well. So it can be the case that yes, the child simply maybe doesn't enjoy working with that particular person, and that's okay. That's quite okay. We see this happen maybe once or twice here and there. We're often told by parents, for instance, that this year my child is working better with this particular LSE, for instance, because we find that, for example, they've clicked more as a pair. This doesn't mean by any means that the previous LSE was for instance, doing a terrible job, but it just simply means that the current LSE maybe has a better chemistry with the child. Could be due to a number of reasons: the way she dresses, the way she's calm, or maybe she's more upbeat, the way her voice sounds. So it could be for a number of reasons. We could easily test this out. Yeah, by very easily, actually. So we could maybe see if another professional or another person could switch with us and maybe take over for a little bit, and in the meantime we could see how the child reacts, and that is usually enough to determine whether the child is better motivated by a change of person. If you don't notice a difference in their response, maybe they just aren't internally motivated, or maybe they are feeling overwhelmed by something else. If you do happen to find a difference, then maybe it would be beneficial to honor the child's preference, if possible, obviously, if only if this is possible, in the same way that we would honor a child's request when, for instance, they say, I don't like this food, for example. You probably would try your best to change it. All right, so the third point, I'm moving on to the third point to consider when motivating your child is that of anticipation. So in our practice, we often encounter children or teens with a disability that are highly dependent on their caregivers for something to be done for them. So in other words, caregivers do most of the things for them. This is something very, very good, because I myself personally, I love it when parents show that they are like such a good support system for their child. But anticipating what a child needs is like cutting off a person who stutters. It reduces the opportunity to communicate before communicating gets to even occur. We encounter a lot of parents who come to us knowing that they want a communication system for their child, and obviously because that is our job, that is what we do, we then provide them with a communication system. But we must keep in mind that without any opportunity to communicate, the child is less motivated to use the system. And if the child is not motivated, then the system will obviously not be used. So what we can do is anticipate less, play the fool maybe here once or twice here and there, and amend the way in which we respond to a child's behavior, to a child's hand leading, for instance. Reducing anticipation and providing communication opportunities to motivate our child is actually so important that I am going to be delving into a bit more. Yes.
Because the screen is looking gray at the moment.
Gray, yes, it is.
Okay, maybe we can. Okay, no, we can. I think we can stop and reshare again so that it will be visible for the participants as well.
Okay. Shall I share it from my end?
Yes, same. Share it from your end. Thank you.
Share. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. So.
Okay, you can continue. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Sharon. All right. So, as I was saying, so we're going to be talking a bit more about. May has already spoken a bit about communication opportunities, but we have further ideas for you in the next slide. So. The next point I want to talk about is the point at the bottom, which is called sensory input modality. So we really need to keep in mind the strengths and the preferences of our child. So in the same way that we as adults differ in the way that we take in information. For instance, some of us are visual learners, whereas others maybe tend to be a bit tend to prefer learning through the auditory means. In the same way, our children have such preferences in this respect, and learning the right sensory modality. Input modality increases motivation, which in turn increases learning. So in the case of our children, if we had to apply this to our children, this means that we would need to determine what our child learns best with. If it's whether through pictures or through videos, and maybe pictures, even the pictures, we would need to consider what the level of the pictures, whether they are symbols, whether they are real photos. Maybe we could go for something more auditory, that is something like along the lines of music, for instance. When we identify such strengths and preferences, we could use these strategies and put them in place, and hopefully with the right information going in through the right modality, we could get the information we want out from them. Okay, so I'm just checking the time. All right. Okay, so then I'm going to move on to the next point, which is consistency for success, which is also a very important component for motivating our children. Consistency is one important part of achieving success. So just to give you a very simple example, if I wanted to lose weight and I'd consistently work out and eat healthy, hopefully I would actually lose weight, and that would be something successful for me. This success would probably help me become more motivated to continue maybe working out and continue eating healthy. Why? Because I'm enjoying the way I'm looking, and I enjoy feeling good. The adrenaline I get from success in this case is helping me to continue to be more motivated and maybe improve in certain aspects of my training, for instance. So if we had to apply this same notion to our children, it would go maybe something like this. So if we are consistent with them, the chances for success will increase. When they are successful, they become better motivated. In the process, parents are probably motivated as well, because obviously who doesn't like seeing their child succeed. When our child is successful, we have to make sure to let them know and encourage them to do it again. So yes, success is very important to help keep the child motivated. So I'm moving on to the last point, which is environment. So again, if we had to apply this to us adults, who enjoys working in an unpleasant environment? I hope that no one actually does, but if I had to speak for myself, for instance, when my environment changes to a better one, even just very small changes, so for example getting new furniture, or like getting cupboards or a nice office chair, I immediately feel a sense of encouragement and motivation to actually continue working in that environment. The same applies to our children. So it is very important to consider the child the environment is either living in, or maybe the workstation and the homes or the clinics. Ask yourself, do they encourage learning? Do they appeal to the child's interests and needs? Maybe what changes can we make that better suit our child's needs? And perhaps it's changing the lighting, or reducing the clutter, or introduce more colors, or maybe different colors, maybe pastel colors, whatever the needs are. And these are only just some ideas that we can keep in mind when it comes to making sure that our child is provided with the right environment that obviously promotes motivation and hopefully ultimately results in learning. So those were a few pointers with regards to maybe that would help guide you to motivate your child a bit more. And as I said, and the next thing I'm going to talk about is providing, I'm just giving some tips here, as you can see on your screen, some tips about how to, as I said before, play the fool and provide communication opportunities for your child. So the first one, which is right at the top, is maybe you could pause a familiar activity. So for instance, if you're playing with the ball with your child, maybe you're throwing the ball, or maybe you're rolling the ball. As soon as you get the activity going, so you are rolling the ball back and forth to each other, if you pause the activity, and you notice what the child is doing, you would probably, if the child is finding the activity very fun and motivating, you would probably notice a reaction of some sort. He would either maybe look at you, he would either make some vocalizations of some sort, which shows you, hey, listen, throw back the ball, you know, like continue going with the game because I'm enjoying it. That is a very good opportunity for you to model whatever words you are currently working on. So perhaps you are modeling more. So we're going to do more of throwing the ball, or for instance, you can use the word go. Maybe you can play a ready steady go game, and on go you could throw the ball to them. The same with, for example, using a tablet. Maybe you could pause the music for them, and they could ask you to play video or play music. That is a very, very good opportunity where you could introduce some words that you are currently working on. All right, so the second one is place a favorite object out of reach. We are big fans of this in our clinic. In fact, if you had to come to our clinic, you'd see that most of the, if not all, most of our toys are out of reach. Obviously, we do this for a reason. It's so that our children don't just take the object, but we encourage them to actually ask for it. This could obviously not just be through their AAC system. For us, if they are pointing to their favorite object on the shelf, or they are hand reaching towards it, for us that is a request. If in that case the child owns an AAC system, we would use that opportunity to direct them to use their AAC system to ask for the doll, or to ask for the car, for instance, whatever it is they're requesting. So the third one is offer a little bit. So this is something you can really easily do at home. So for instance, if I had to just give you a very simple example, when it comes to eating or drinking, yes, it's going to take a bit more time, but you would be working on something that is very, very beneficial and important to the child. So for instance, say it's during lunchtime, you could, and the child asks you or shows you that he wants to drink, you could try and make it a little bit more difficult for the child, and offer him just a sip of water in the cup, knowing that he would probably ask you for more because you gave him such a little amount of water. You are doing that on purpose, obviously, because if you provide them a little bit, if they really want more, which they probably would want, they would ask you somehow, show you that they want more. It's either they're going to give you back the cup, it's either they are going to vocalize something, or maybe look at you in a way like, you know, is that all you're going to give me? That is a very, very good opportunity for you to model a particular word. For instance, again, more or drink, or maybe if we're looking onto more sentences, want more drink, or I want more drink. And it's also good to mention that you could really and truly do this with any activity, and be it whether you're playing with the child, maybe it's you're handing him, you're playing with blocks, or you're playing with a series of toys. You could offer them one by one. So in that way, we would be creating an opportunity for the child to communicate with you. So the fourth point is create opportunities for a child to request. This basically obviously covers things like actually providing a chance for the child to communicate and request for help. So for instance, you could offer them something that is a little bit difficult for them to manipulate or to open. And obviously you'd be doing this on purpose. So that at that point you could teach them to ask you to ask for you to help them. You would model that on their system, for instance, be it whether it's a high-tech or a low-tech system. You could do this with any system, basically. Maybe you could offer them, if you're going to give them their bottle, you could close it really tightly so that they would have no option but to ask you for help to open the bottle, for instance, or want water, or maybe their favorite toy is enclosed in a very tight container, want toy, for instance. Help please would be a very nice phrase to work on. So it's creating opportunities for a child to request for help is something that we find ourselves giving lots of ideas to parents, and quite often actually, because we feel it's a very important goal, and for a child to be able to and know how to ask for help when he actually needs it. The last point I will be talking about is offering choices. I'm probably you are quite familiar with this term. It's choice making, and so it's if you're automatically, if you're presenting a choice of two objects, for instance, between to your child, you are automatically creating an opportunity to communicate. Now, if you're holding two objects in front of the child's face, maybe the most natural response for a child would be to look at the preferred item, or to hand reach to the preferred item, or to point at it, which is, as I said before, is still a way is still a way of communicating. But at least at that point, you would be creating an opportunity where the child is making a choice and is asking you for their preferred item. As I said, then if a child is using a particular system, you would maybe prompt them a little bit in that case to and show them what words they can use on their device to ask for that particular item. So choice making and offering choices is something that is very important, and also can be easily applied really and truly in any activity, be it whether it's lunchtime or playtime, any activity really and truly. All right, so I believe we're moving on to the next part of the presentation. Yes, so it's prompting. Martina.
Thank you, Jamie.
I'm going to give the floor to you.
Thank you very much. I was going to reshare my screen.
Okay. Oops. I could stop sharing from my end.
Okay, can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, thank you, Jamie, for the very interesting tips on motivation and choosing the right reinforcers when working with our children. I remind you to feel free to ask any questions that you might have in the comment section, and we'll be answering them at the end of this webinar. So now that Jamie has guided us through the motivation and reinforcers, the best ones that we might need to choose when working with our children, automatically when choosing the right reinforcers, we are creating an opportunity for our children to ask us that they want to play with reinforcers or to indicate that they want them. But how is the child going to communicate with us that they want them if they might not know how to use their AAC system, if they're still learning how to use their AAC system and how to find words on the system? And here is where I'm going to introduce prompting and where I'm going to be talking in more depth about prompting and what we can do to help assist our learners to use their AAC system. So basically, prompting is a strategy which is used to assist and help someone who is learning how to use their AAC system. This is done by the communication partner, which can be us as adults, us as parents, therapists, anyone who is working closely with the child to help them use their AAC system. There are three main different types of prompting methods, and these can be verbal prompts, visual prompts, and physical or tactile prompts, but I'll be going into them very soon in more depth, so I can tell you more about them. Ultimately, whatever prompt method you choose and whatever strategy you choose, the ultimate goal over here is that we help the child achieve independence. We help the children become independent communicators. Okay, so let's have a look at the different types of prompting. As I said, we have the verbal prompts. These are spoken cues. They are spoken prompts which we give to our children to guide them through the appropriate, to guide them how to make an appropriate response. The verbal prompt can be as general as asking the child to use the system. So you might say something like, you can tell me, you can use your AAC device to tell me. Or you can be more specific and guide the child through the steps that they need to do. So if we take bubbles as an example, if the child wants to communicate that he or she wants to play with bubbles, we can guide them and we can tell them you can find bubbles. So first you need to go into the play folder, then you need to choose bubbles from there, okay? So like that, we're giving them step-by-step instructions as to what they need to do to find the word bubbles. Visual prompts, on the other hand, are prompts and cues which the child can see. They are the visible prompts which the child is seeing. The child is seeing you do, okay? And these can include pointing and gestures, okay? And again, we can give a visual prompt in a general way. So we can just point to the AAC system, and like that we are indicating that we want the child to use the system with us. And we can also be specific. Again, going back to the bubble example, if the child wants to communicate bubbles, we can actually point to the specific location on the display. So we can find the word bubble and point to that word in the system to help the child specifically ask for that request. On the other hand, a physical and a tactile prompt is something which you are manually doing to guide the AAC user. Okay, we usually introduce physical or tactile prompts in cases where we see that the response that the child is doing is very difficult for him to perform. So we might need to intervene by using a physical prompt. Again, when doing a physical prompt, the physical prompt can be a full physical prompt, which means you can physically take the child's hand and guide them to complete a request. So from the beginning till the end. So again, if the child wants to request bubbles, you will take the child's hand and hand over hand, help him and prompt him to make that request for bubbles. So we are going into the play folder and then we are choosing the bubbles. But it can also be a partial physical prompt where you are helping the child initiate this request, but then letting him complete this request. So you might help the child, guide the child into one folder, but then wait and allow time for the child to complete this on their own. And like this, you would be performing a partial physical prompt. Oopsie. Can you still see my presentation? Okay. So as I said, these are the three main types of prompts, but we can also take a multi-sensory approach to this prompting method when you can introduce more than one prompt at a time. So we might want to use verbal prompts and the visual prompts at the same time, or you might want to use a physical prompt and a verbal prompt. So while you're guiding the child to find the right word on the system, you might want to tell them, oh, it's bubbles, there is bubbles, let's press on play first. Or you might want to give a visual prompt while you're explaining where the child can find the word on the system. So while you're guiding the child verbally as to where they can find the words, you are pointing at the same time. So like this, we are using more than one modality at one go. And in some cases, we find that this is also helpful for children. So we've talked about prompting and the different prompting methods, but sometimes we find parents who tell us, but how will I know which is the best prompt to introduce, or how will I know that I am providing enough prompts and not too many? And here is where I'm going to be talking about the prompting hierarchy. So basically, the prompting hierarchy is all about providing the right types of prompts at the right time. When we are supporting our children, obviously, we don't want to provide the wrong prompts, and we don't want to provide too much of these prompts, because if we provide too much, this will impede learning and might affect the self-confidence of the child, or might cause more problems along the way. Later on, I will be talking about prompt dependency. So, as I said, going back to the very beginning, I said that the ultimate goal over here is to help the child become independent communicators. So we want to introduce prompting to help the children, but we don't want to provide too much that they become dependent on us. So it's about finding the right balance. What can we do? First, we need to, going back to what Jamie said, we need to find the right reinforcer. When finding the right reinforcer, we are going to invite the child to engage the child to take part in this situation. And obviously, like this, we are creating a communication opportunity. The prompting hierarchy is all about waiting. We're going to see that waiting over here is a consistent cue, because whatever we are going to be doing is going to be followed by a 5-second waiting time. Like this, when we are waiting, we are giving the child the opportunity to initiate a communication, to initiate some sort of communication with us, to say a verbalization, to make a gesture, to tell us that they want more from their device. So when we are waiting, we are allowing this time for the children to make such a request. So and we always presume that the child can carry out such a communication with us. So the prompting hierarchy always starts with providing less and gradually increasing depending to what the child needs. So let's say the child wants, again, to play with bubbles. So we are going to get the bubble tube, and we are going to show the child that you have the bubbles. And here you are going to wait for the child to make a response. If the child smiles or touches the bubbles, he is indicating that they want bubbles. If the child does nothing, after waiting 5 seconds, okay, so after giving that time for the child to make a request, we can ask an open-ended question. So we can ask the child things like, what do you want? Or what should we do next? Or where do you want to go? So like that, we are asking an open-ended question, and again, we need to wait 5 seconds to allow the child to make a reaction, to initiate some sort of communication with us. After 5 seconds, if the child again does nothing and it is too difficult for him at this stage to make a response, we can provide a partial prompt, and we can provide a partial response over here. So if you might think that the child wants to play with blocks, you can offer a choice, and you can say things like, do you want the blue block or the red block? Or if you might think that the child wants bubbles, you can model, and you can provide a partial response. You can say things like, I want, and then you're going to pause for 5 seconds to allow time for the child to communicate with bubbles. Or you can model on the device, I want, and again you're going to pause for 5 seconds, approximately 5 seconds, to allow time for the child to communicate a response with us. Again, if after waiting 5 seconds the child does not respond, then we are going to provide a full model. Okay, and like so we are helping the child complete the full response that they might have wanted to communicate with us. It is very important that whatever the child communicates and wherever they communicate it throughout the prompting hierarchy, so be it if they communicated it in the beginning when they saw the bubbles, or at the end, or at the end of the prompt hierarchy when you had to completely help the child complete a response, it's very important to provide descriptive feedback. So by this I mean that we need, whenever the child makes a desired response or a target response, we acknowledge this response and we praise the child by giving them this descriptive feeling. So we can say things like, oh, you want more bubbles? Here you go, and you're going to provide the child with bubbles. Or we can say things, oh, you like it, you want bubbles, let's play with bubbles. And like that, you're acknowledging what the child communicated with you, and you are giving praise and feedback to what they did. It is very important to allow time for the children to communicate what they might want to say with us. But as you can see over here, we're providing a systematic prompting strategy. Okay, we're helping the children communicate what they want with us, and we're providing them an opportunity to learn more vocabulary, to learn new words. Ideally, when we are introducing this prompting hierarchy, we are monitoring how much prompts we're giving so that we can go back to it after some time and revisit and say, okay, I think now my child has mastered this amount of prompts. Let me reduce it a bit, because like I said, we don't want the children to become dependent on what we are doing, and the ultimate goal here would be that we want the children to become independent. So if we revisit and adjust depending on how much progress the child has made, we can obviously then provide prompts depending on to the needs of the children at that time. I'd like to share a video with you which sums up what I've been saying, but you'll be able to see someone who, over here, this person is using a mid-tech device. So and the reinforcers over here are a cutting activity and a magazine. So we're going to see the constant waiting. The communication partner is constantly providing the child opportunities to communicate. Okay. And she's allowing 5 seconds for the child to make a request.
I want to look at a magazine.
Okay, here you go.
Okay, as you can see, the child requested for the magazine, and it was a complete independence request. Okay, but what are we going to do in cases where the child might need some prompts? And
Martina, okay. It could be we have some technical issues. We'll try to sort them out. Sharon, I could try and share the video myself. Sharon?
Yes, you can try and share it yourself, yes.
Actually, I think Martina's best.
hello again, I apologize. I just experienced a technical difficulty and my laptop just restarted for some reason. I'm going to share the PowerPoint with you again. Okay. I'm not sure if you can see my...
Not yet, Martina, just... Okay.
Okay.
You can, now it is live, it's showing. Okay.
So as you could see, this person was modeling on the device, and again the importance of allowing time. So the communication partner was constantly waiting and allowing time for the person to make a request, to indicate if they wanted to play with the magazine or to do the cutting activity. As we saw in this video, in the beginning, the person was independently capable of requesting that the magazine. But then, as I said earlier, as I went to the prompting hierarchy, we provided prompts slowly. So first, by providing a verbal prompt, providing a choice, and then if the child continues to find difficulty, we can help assist by providing a full physical prompt. So like that, we're helping the children complete the request that they might want. It is important to provide prompts because like this, we are helping the child to learn where they can find these words. But it is important, but it is also as important that our children do not depend and rely solely on you to complete such requests. So when we refer to prompt dependency, we are referring to the child who is over relying to your help to complete such requests. It is important that we start being aware of this and reducing such prompts to keep encouraging the child to be independent communicators. So what can we do to reduce the amount of prompts that we are giving our children, and obviously to prevent the child from becoming fully dependent on you to perform such requests? So we can start off by reducing prompts from the most to the least, and by this we mean from the full physical prompt to less prompts. Okay. So the aim is from giving the amount of prompts that you are giving the child to reducing them to less, to reaching a verbal prompt rather than a physical prompt. Okay, and reducing these prompts slowly. So what can we really do? Time delay again. Over here, we've constantly seen the importance of waiting and allowing time throughout this webinar. So give your children time, wait and allow for the child to do something, okay, to initiate a response. We can also fade our prompts and gradually start reducing the prompts that we are giving our children. So again, if we are providing the child a full physical prompt, you can reduce this to a partial prompt, okay? So give the child time to complete the last part of the request. And then you can continue reducing this to a gesture, okay? And you faded this from a full physical prompt to just a point on the AAC system to indicate to the child that they need to say something, and like this we've reduced the prompts quite a lot. Another thing that you can do is shaping. You can do such strategy to help develop target behaviors that you'd like your child to start exhibiting. And again, over here, we are introducing a succession of approximants, so giving the child time and slowly adding another piece to what the child is doing. And we are gradually shaping the child's behavior in like this. I hope that you found this these tips on prompts important, useful, and I encourage you to stay tuned for our next webinar on the 8th July, which will be giving more practical ideas on how you can implement AAC at home. I'll be giving the floor to Sharon. Continue this webinar.
Yes, thank you, Martina, and thank you all of you, Jamie and May. That was very informative webinar and interesting as well. And yes, as you said, we will be going to follow with another webinar on the 8th July, which will be about the implementing of goals. So we had some questions from the audience, and maybe we can answer, we can help to answer these questions. And if anyone out there has other questions and you would like to post any questions, feel free to post both in English and in Maltese. And we will be asking I will be answering your questions now. So the first question we had is, my child refuses to use AAC device. What can I do? I don't, maybe one of you can answer this question. Maybe Martina.
Can you repeat the question, Sharon, please?
Yes, so the question is, my child refuses to use AAC device. What can I do?
A very interesting question. Thank you, Sharon. And it is one that a lot of parents actually make us aware of and ask about. So sometimes children start refusing to use their AAC system. It might be because of an environmental factor. It might be because we are expecting them to use the system and they are still learning. What I always suggest to parents is that the importance of modeling. So going back to what May said in the very beginning, the importance of modeling. So use the system with the children, and when you are using it with them, you are automatically showing the child what words they can use and where they can find them, but use the system with them without expecting the child to make any other responses. So like that, the child is seeing you use it, but without that extra pressure. That extra pressure we are putting on the child to perform a request, and automatically chances are that the child will imitate what you are doing and eventually will start showing some interest to use the AAC system again. So I think that's what I would suggest. So for parents to use the system with the children without expecting the child to perform any requests, and be consistent. The importance of consistency as well, to use the system every day. If it's not being used, leave it in a place where it is accessible to the child. So we start introducing that element of consistency and encouraging the child to use it in an indirect way.
Thank you, Martina. Yes, and this is very important that this is kind of has to become a habit, that when we are around these people, children using AAC devices, we have to use them as well. And we have another question as well. This person is saying, do you have any tips for a child with autism who refuses to use the AAC device, even having the device near him? So the device is near him, but they really refuse to use the AAC device. Maybe May would like to answer this question, please.
Thank you, Sharon. I think this is a really interesting one, because in some ways it's related to the previous question. After all, this is not necessarily about the diagnosis. It's not wanting to use the device. So regardless of diagnosis, you want to explore a little bit what's going on here. I am assuming that this child had a full assessment and maybe had a trial. If he had a trial, then I would have hoped that he liked the device during that time. If he didn't have a trial, there might be an issue here. I think I would definitely want to go back to just using the device myself. Remember the slides that I gave where we had those cartoon faces, that we're expecting a child to do something that he sees nobody else do. So there could be an issue with this. So definitely go back to just modeling and using the device in a very non-pressurizing way myself first to see what happens there. The second thing is I would go back to what Jamie was talking about, and that's motivation, right? How am I expecting this child to use this device? Is somebody doing a lot of testing with the device? Has it been used in just a social way? Do we need to go back and review everything?
Yeah, in fact, we have another question. I'm going to publish it. And in fact, it ties with what you're saying, because this person is saying that her child keeps on pressing the device for fun. Sometimes we see this, and what they do, like, you know, they keep on testing. This is the testing. That's why I'm also.
Okay. I think that's a kind of separate question. I do think this. Every child, you need to go back and examine what's happening with the child and what's happening in the environment that he's in too. Was it maybe used originally in school and lots of testing was done? Because that's something that would put somebody off wanting to use the device. You know, we were saying today about the need for social interaction and for it to be fun. So I would definitely just go back, just modeling, use it yourself and see if he starts to accept it in that way first. And see what happens from there, I think. Because we don't know enough about this child at this point to give you a definite answer. So I feel I want to explore a lot of different things here. And look at yourself and see how you've been using it, see how it was being used in school. Could sometimes be something really simple like the colour of it, or the touch of it, the feel of it. So these are all things you want to look at, especially with a child with autism, where other things that we might not think about are actually coming into it. Also, it could be too many words on the device or not the right words, and the way he's been expected to use it. So there's lots of different things you want to explore here. You probably need to discuss this with your speech therapists. Going to the second question, Sharon, that you mentioned there, right? What was it again? Can you remind me?
Yes, actually, it's Lorraine asking the question. So it is like having the testing, like the child would be testing and doing kind of like pressing the icons for fun and laughing maybe, and you can see. And I think this happens with a lot of children. Maybe you can expand on this.
We would think that a lot of this is quite normal when you have children who are starting out as communicators. That they are trying to see, they're learning what the device can do. So in a sense, it's like just exploring. If he could talk, he would be exploring with verbal words, but he's exploring with the device instead. I do think, however, that there's a time when you're going to say, I need to stop him if it's becoming a cycle. And also, I think that you need to model and praise him for the things he does that are correct. Right, and maybe not give so much attention if it's just a cycle that he's trying to get a laugh from you, because it really depends why he's doing it as well. Is it a behavior thing? Is he trying to get a reaction from you? Or is he just genuinely just looking at what's in the device? So you want to look at that.
Okay, thank you, May. And so we have another questions. Yes, maybe Jamie would like to answer this question, and it is about, yes, having a child who use the device only for asking for food, for requesting food. What can we do to expand a little bit more than that?
Okay, so another very good question. So it's actually a very common question I get. Why? Because usually when we start to introduce a device, we start by introducing the communication function of requesting. Probably it's because it's the easiest to teach. It's the one that maybe makes more sense for our children, because it's very easy to request, because if I request, I get something in return. Whereas other communicative functions like greetings or commenting, really and truly, they don't give anything back in return. We just use them in our daily communication. As part of communication, because we don't just communicate to requests, really and truly. So I think May briefly covered this during her section, and it was really basically it ties down to, again, modeling. So for instance, if we are talking about things that maybe we want to introduce communicative function of commenting. For instance, we want to teach the child to comment about something. I like a sandwich. I don't like apple. We could model these in passing, so as they go along. So if you can see that the child is enjoying something, enjoying a particular activity, you could at that point show him using his device what he can do and what words he can do to produce that particular comment. You could, for example, if you see him that he's enjoying his sandwich, you could model, I like sandwich, you like sandwich. The same goes for the opposite, basically. If you see that he is not enjoying a particular food or not enjoying a particular activity, that would be a very good opportunity while the activity is happening to model something along the lines of, you don't like apple, for instance, or you don't like blocks. Maybe he wants to play with something else at that point. So yes, I think the main thing here is to model, and to model at times when it is actually happening, because at that point the child would be experiencing something, and it's like you are labeling that experience, and you're putting that experience into words and giving it more meaning. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, I think it really gave a good points about it. In fact, if I do a summary of what you were talking about, all of you, I think the take-home messages is definitely modeling and using the device so that everyone around the children using AAC device have to see other people using the devices, so that they would continue to imitate us, like other children imitate us, even when we talk in Maltese or we talk in English. And these children who use the AAC device has to see the people around them using these devices. So model. And I think another take-home message is waiting. So waiting is really important, to give the time for these children to make their attempt. I think if we don't have any more questions, I don't know if you want from the panel, you want to add anything else? Okay, I don't think there is anything else to add.
You know what I think?
Yeah.
Sharon, can I say something here?
Yes, you can add, please.
Just wanted to say, I hope that you found that useful, but if there are any topics that you think you would like us to talk about some more, we could actually be thinking about that for future webinars. We do have another one for AAC specifically in July.
Yes, in fact, I'm going to try to share the poster of that webinar. Okay, so I think that would be this one. And I think it's sharing now at this point in time. Okay, can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, so this is the webinar you are talking about, May, setting up an AAC implementation plan for AAC users at home, practical activities and examples. And this is going to happen on Wednesday, 8 July from 10 o'clock till 12 o'clock. So yes, please book your time so that you join us, and this will be obviously be a continuation of what we were talking about, but also to see how we can set up ourselves at home to use the AAC device. I don't know, May you want to add something else, or Jamie or Martina? Okay, so I would like also to also inform you that next week, on the 24th of June, from 11 till 1 p.m., I will be presenting a webinar on assistive technology to support writing. And the aim is to see what are alternative pencils, what that we can use for those children to that have difficulties to do handwriting and to use the pencil. But there are other ways that we can use, alternative ways that we can promote. Obviously, the aim is to help these people to do content and writing and create sentences and be creative. And we are going to talk about that and about other tools that can help these children with writing. I would like to also remind you to follow the Argentina Sapport website because there are other webinars going on. In fact, there is going to be another one next Tuesday, and it is about siblings and how we can help siblings of children with disabilities. I think that's all for today, and please contact us. Maybe we can put up the our telephone number as well. So some of you can please share the last slide, please.
Yeah, last slide.
I can do it if you want.
Okay,
Yes,
Jamie.
right here. So share.
Thank you. And so there is our email. Please, whoever maybe have any other questions, or as May said, you have any topics that you would like us to address, please contact us on that email or that telephone number. Thank you all and bye. Have a nice afternoon.